game.
What's going on, y'all? It's Big John. How y'all doing? Welcome to another episode of It's All in the Game. I'm repping my team today, y'all. All right, so before I kick it off, I need to ask y'all a favor. I need to ask y'all if you can try to watch the video all the way through to the end. All right. See, YouTube uses algorithms to see where they're going to place a video in somebody's search. And I'm trying to get these videos to as many people as possible, not just for my own good. I really think that if we can get this information to enough people, maybe, just maybe, we can have a positive impact on the criminal justice system. That's my hope anyway. Maybe it's a pipe dream. Anyway, it can't hurt, all right? I appreciate it, okay? So, without further ado, today we're going to talk about drug-induced homicide laws. So what a drug-induced homicide law is when someone dies of an overdose and the prosecutor goes after the person they believe provided the deceased with the drugs they overdosed on. All right? These laws were put on the books back in the 80s, and they were written in an effort to go after kingpins, although they were rarely used for the next 30 or 40 years after they were put on the books. It wasn't until the last 5 to 10 years that we've seen a jump in overdose deaths that we've really seen prosecutors pull these laws out and start implementing them. But they're not using them to take down any kind of drug kingpins the majority of the time. The majority of the time, they're going after low-level street dealers or the friends of users or just somebody that the person was getting high with at the time. So this presents huge problems on all sorts of levels. The public perception of a drug dealer is generally informed by mass media, movies and television and such. They see drug dealers as these terrible people that are willing to prey on children and murder people for territory and all this stuff. In reality, much of the time, if not the majority of the time, the people who use drugs are getting their drugs from other people who use drugs. And that can work any number of ways. Maybe I'm a user, my friend's got a better plug than I have, so I just call him and he goes and cops for me. And maybe he's calling me a month later because my plug is better, right? Or maybe my plug is really just a guy with a drug habit as well, and the drug dealer just gives him 50 bags to sell a day and tells him he can keep 5 of them. More often than not, these are the ways that a drug user is going to get their drugs. So by charging someone like this with a drug-induced homicide, all they're really doing is taking another drug user off the street and ruining their life in the process. Even if they are getting a drug dealer, generally they're probably just getting a street-level drug dealer as opposed to someone who really makes any difference in the game. Street-level drug dealers are generally pretty replaceable, and they're going to be replaced as soon as they're incarcerated. So then what's the benefit of these laws, really? Or are there any? I guess if there's any benefit, it benefits the families, maybe, of the person who died. Maybe they'll feel better that somebody is being punished for their loved one's death. The problem is, this is really just scapegoating. Because when it comes down to it, whether or not you believe the person that overdosed was a drug addict that has a disease, or they're just a bad person, or they're making bad decisions, or they're just living a lifestyle that should be defended, that person knew the risks of what they were doing when they were doing it, and they made that choice to do that themselves. In almost every single instance, they actively sought out the drugs that they put in their body that they overdosed on. So blaming it on somebody else, whether it's a drug dealer or whether it's one of their friends, is really just scapegoating. So who else can help? Maybe it's beneficial for the prosecutor. I guess that's an obvious. The prosecutor can say they're being tough on crime and they're cracking down and getting rid of these drug dealers, even though that statement rings pretty hollow if you actually look at what they're saying. So beyond that, are there any real benefits? And I don't think so. Negatives, though, there are plenty. First and foremost, you're placing the blame where it should not be placed. And you're incarcerating somebody. You're ruining somebody else's life. All it is doing is punitively punishing someone collaterally related to this person's overdose. Beyond that, though, drug-induced homicide laws create huge barriers for people to seek help if they see somebody overdosing. If someone knows that the police could show up and they could be prosecuted for homicide if this person who is overdosing in front of them dies, they're much, much, much less likely to call 911. All right, so states that are creating Good Samaritan laws, while that is a step in the right direction, if they're also utilizing drug-induced homicide laws, they're really sending a mixed signal, and people are going to be much less likely to call 911. Another problem is that these laws do nothing to slow the rate of overdose, or even to slow the rate of usage or sales on the street, if that's their stated goal. And finally, these laws are going to increase and perpetuate the harms associated with criminalization. For many people who use drugs, the worst things that happen to them because what they're doing is illegal. If it weren't against the law to put that substance in their body, they wouldn't be criminals. They could probably go to the store and buy their substance of choice legally. They wouldn't have to steal for it. It'd be more like alcohol. Look what alcohol did for crime in the Roaring 20s. It's been the same way for drugs for the last 50 years. And really, these laws only increase the harm that drug users feel from criminalization. There is no positive benefit to them. All these laws do is tear apart families and homes and communities and increase our already world record prison rates. What are we supposed to do about this? Just because you have the knowledge that something is really, really fucked up, it's often very difficult to do something about it and to affect positive change. Well, in this situation, a group of drug users from the East Coast got together and started a project called Reframe the Blame. What it does is effectively gives drug users a voice and lets their voice be heard even if they were to have overdosed and died. What it is a form. It's called a do not prosecute order, and it's similar to a do not resuscitate, a DNR that you'd have in the hospital. Basically what this form says is if I die in the event of an overdose, I do not want you to go after and prosecute anybody associated with that overdose. I want you to acknowledge that this is something I chose to do of my own free will, and if there's any blame to be put anywhere, it's on this system, and it's not on my friends, all right? Now, this document is not legally binding in a court of law, but what it does do is it goes a long way to showing your family, and maybe showing the prosecutor, how you felt about things. I realize there might be a great reluctance for some people to download a document like this and put your name on it and put your signature behind it. But this document, this whole program, is backed by some pretty reputable organizations. One of the biggest ones is called the Drug Policy Alliance. And the Drug Policy Alliance is the largest lobbying organization for changes in drug laws in the world. I mean, they are a giant organization. Beyond that, there's the New England Users Union, there's the Urban Survivors Union, and I believe the North Carolina Urban Survivors Union. So there's a handful of very reputable organizations behind this. These documents are stored very securely, and the only way that they would ever see the light of day is in the very unfortunate event that you passed away from an overdose. But in that event, it would let your voice be heard and let your loved ones and let the law know that you don't want somebody prosecuted for your death. So if this is something you're interested in, check out the link in the description below. Follow that link, download that form, and get it back to these people, because this is a way that you can really affect some positive change. And most of the time, that's pretty difficult to do where drug laws are concerned. It's like stopping a moving train, to quote Howard Zinn. Like I said before, it doesn't matter if you call it problematic drug use, if you call it addiction, if you see it as a disease, or if you see it as just a poor choice, or a failing in character, or if you see it as something that is a lifestyle that should be defended and is not even a problem at all. In any of these situations, a person is making a decision to put something into their own body. And I can't imagine, having lived as one of those people for many, many years in my life, that any of you would want to see a friend or family member prosecuted in the event of your death from an overdose. All right, whatever y'all do, stay safe out there. Take care of yourself. Take care of your loved ones. Big John told you so. It's all in the game.